Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a very special episode of the Loan Officer Wealth Podcast. We are here with Michelle BERMAN. Michelle, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, we are going to be talking all things social media, and I know that you have the Instagram power method specifically for loan officers and people in the real estate industry. So, to get started, could you explain what the Instagram power method is and how you kind of came to be in this position of influence with social media in the mortgage industry?
Yeah, that's an amazing start to this. And it's probably one of my favorite stories, honestly. And I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to because I think we've all been there in our careers. But many, many years ago, I worked in corporate America like most people start typically out of college. And I actually graduated with a degree in journalism and psychology with the thought process of you can't write about people if you don't understand people. And so I very quickly kind of face planted into the public relations space, social media, public relations specifically because, I was young and it just kind of made sense. But at the time, it was very Twitter and Facebook heavy. Instagram really wasn't a thing quite yet. It existed, but nobody had really figured out kind of what Instagram can do for them, essentially. And so this was back in 2014. I only worked for the company for about 6 months before I quit. And it came down to one thing, which was they just did not believe in the power of a personal presence. Everything was very cookie cutter. Every client, no matter how much they paid, the content was exactly the same. We pretty much would change a logo here and there. And even at 24, it just did not sit well with me. And I just felt like there had to be a better way. So I quit and actually fell into a really unique situation. I was actually at the CrossFit gym venting to a girlfriend about, I was going to quit this company because it was just ridiculous what they were doing. And her husband overheard me and said, "Hey, I have this really unique opportunity with Instagram. Why don't you come over for dinner? My wife and I will talk to you about this whole thing." So I thought, hell, it's a free dinner, right? What's the worst that could happen? So I went over to their house. We had dinner and he described to me the most incredible, unique experience, which was essentially buying and selling Instagram accounts like you would buy and sell and then flip real estate. So you buy Instagram accounts, you grow them, you sell advertising space on it, and then you essentially flip them as the account grows. So you go from, 10,000 followers to 1 million followers, you grow the engagement percentage, all of the other logistics that go into it. And then once you get to a certain point, you essentially put it on the account on the market and people buy it. So I sold my second Instagram account for almost $90,000 cash. Like just somebody just wrote a check for it.
That's amazing.
And so it was kind of insane what was happening in the space. But what I was doing was I was essentially building accounts in a very targeted and very authentic way. I started discovering that, this thing called buying followers and buying video views and buying likes and all of that became very prominent. And what the brands were doing were they were reaching out to me essentially kind of as the middleman saying, "Hey, Michelle, here's $5,000. Can you make all the ads? Can you write all the copy? And then can you choose which accounts to put our content on? And then if you turn a profit, we'll send you another $5,000 and you keep going." So needless to say, in the process, I got very good at understanding what kind of content works, what kind of content really resonates with what kind of user. If you look at an account, can you tell if they're buying vanity metrics like the likes, the views, the follow, all of that? Can you tell if it's authentic, if it's the right audience, all the things, right? So that happened in 2017. In 2019, or excuse me, 2018, I hired a business coach and flew across the world to the UK and met with him in a coffee shop for 8 days in a row. And if you guys can envision this kind of one of those big, I don't know what they're called, like kind of poster board papers with like a Sharpie marker. And we literally just mind mapped and brain dumped everything that is now known as the Instagram power method. Little did I know it at the time. But what he told me is when I got back to the United States, I had to fire all my clients that were not in the real estate or mortgage space, and essentially build what is now called the Instagram Power Method, which is a course designed to teach realtors and loan officers how to really go through that whole process of what I was doing for these big brands. And my love of real estate and really the mortgage space was born out of a huge hole in the market and my love of real estate just as a person.
That is amazing. So
That's it.
let's Again, congratulations on the journey. That is amazing. Um,
Thank you so much.
Let's dive into the Instagram power method, because one of the things that I see all of the time, and I think it's a huge mistake that loan officers and real estate professionals make, is they want to go pay some company $250 or $500 a month and just be like, okay, go do social media for me because I don't know what it is and I don't want to lean on it and I don't like pictures of people's breakfast, and just, I know I need to be on social, so I'm trying to write the smallest check possible to go solve this problem so I feel like I'm doing something. Comparing that to an actual process or your Instagram power method, what are the differences there, and how should a loan officer be approaching their social media to actually generate results from Instagram?
I love this so much. I feel like we could talk about that for an hour easily. But what I will say is the biggest problem I see, and again, we're talking 8 years now that I've been in this game and really dissecting this world. And the problem that I think a lot of people have, as to your point, is they want to write the smallest check possible because they think that that will solve their problem, right? Oh, I checked the social media box today. Everyone says I have to have a social media presence. So, well, at least something goes out, but they never check their messages. They have no idea what the content is that's going out. They don't put a lot of time in the branding, which I know sounds like that phrase sounds overused, but the reality is it's super important. And a lot of people devalue what it is that we actually do, or kind of the term social media manager, where they want to go spend, $5 an hour on somebody in the Philippines, which those people are fantastic. They are workhorses and they do a lot of great things, but they cannot write like you. They cannot sound like you. They cannot do a lot of the authentic pieces to what we're trying to get our clients to do, because they just don't have the understanding. They're not intuitive in that sense because they have never had to do it. And so for us, what the difference is, the Instagram power method, as you mentioned perfectly, is a process. It's a strategy that really goes from what kind of content are we producing, which we have 4 buckets that falls into. We call them our 4 pillars of content, one of which is a value series, if you will. That sounds funny. I was trying to see if there's a different way of saying it, but a value series, which is one topic that you break down over the course of an entire month into 5 separate posts. And a great example right now is we just got off a meeting with one of our clients, and he specializes in working with divorce attorneys. So as a mortgage professional, he's a certified divorce attorney professional. He has whatever the certification is for that. And we created an entire series for him, talking to the divorce attorneys as to why does that divorce attorney need him versus the other way around, right? Where those divorce attorneys think like, oh, I got this figured out. But in reality, a lot of times their clients end up falling victim to, they get divorced, they have a bankruptcy, or their child support gets allocated incorrectly, or their alimony gets filed improperly, and then all of a sudden, like, buying a home becomes a lot harder than it should be. And so for him, it's, can we position him as an expert in this field, where it's not a stock image of, here's a flyer that it would go in a pamphlet at your closing, or not closing is the wrong word, but once you sign your official divorce papers, like, by the way, here's your packet to how to buy a house in the future. So we have to get away from that, right? So for him, elevating the conversation, that's first and foremost what we teach people how to do. Secondly, the engagement part. I can't stress this enough. And, you're a great example of this, Chris, I know it was you DMing me back and forth when we were on Instagram. I think your assistant did one time, but she mentioned it was not you. So that's really, really important, right? Are we showing up as leaders in our messages? Are we returning our messages? Are we returning our text messages? And all of that goes hand in hand with the engagement piece of what we do. And my company actually does 45 comments and 20 story replies every single day on behalf of all of our VIP clients. So I have 3 full-time employed girls that is what they do. They build genuine and authentic connections with our clients, ideal clients. So we have 4 meetings before that person even has a piece of content go live, right? So this is really a lot more than, here's some stock content, let me just go put it out and pray that it doesn't fall on deaf ears, or, go get my coffee and be like, I did social media today,
Totally, 100%. Okay, so there's so much there. I've got two specifics that I want to dive in on. So, first off, you mentioned outbound messaging and conversations on social media with your perfect prospects. We'll keep going with the divorce attorney analogy here. So, that is the Instagram profile of the loan officer reaching out to a targeted list of divorce attorneys in a particular marketplace and starting conversations through direct messages. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And our tracker, our process, the way that we do this is we actually have it built out of 5 days. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then we rotate between 2 different weeks. So week number one is typically their ideal client as far as a third place is concerned, which I can dig into. And then week number two is industry specific. So we're going to go directly to the divorce attorneys, the law firms. We're going to go find, the recent graduates of people who passed the bar exam, things like really in the weeds as to like who are the ideal clients and where are they hanging out. And then the latter half of your question, I think this is important to mention, is that these are not cold messages. These are not cold bumps of like, hey, great content. I'm so excited to connect with you. By the way, I'm a divorce attorney specialist or mortgage professional that specializes in working with divorce attorneys. If you need anybody, here's my website. Like that is not what this is. And so there's a lot of, without giving it away, there's just a lot that goes into how that message is structured and what that initial touch point looks like. And it's really a conversation between us and the client as far as like, what do they sound like? What words do they use? How do they typically approach somebody that they've never spoken to before? So much so that these people have to submit a survey as like, what are their favorite words? What are words that they don't say? What are their kids' names? What kind of dog do they have? Like, I mean, all of the weeds so that we can truly sound like them and really make the messaging come across very authentic to who they are.
That is incredible. And I think for somebody that's looking to outsource that, that's incredible. But even just taking from this episode, think about how just an hour a week could totally transform. Like we have so many loan officers that pay us to make their phone calls for them. And combining that with, okay, here's the list of the 75 people that we called this week, and just sliding into their DMs and be like, hey, I gave you a call this week, hope it's well. And obviously digging into their social. Like go like their profile, see what they're up to, see what's going on in their world. And authenticity is the number one thing when it comes to business, when it comes to outreach, when it comes to your clients, your customers, all of that. The authenticity has to be there. And so many people think that social media is just this weird other platform. It's just a conversation, but you're typing it rather than talking it. It's the exact same thing. So I don't want people to get lost on that. Now, the other interesting thing that you said was about the content and you going out and finding the pillars of content of who they're going to speak to and then what is the message going to be to that audience. So I have a two-part question on that one. Number one, what are you finding to be in the mortgage industry the greatest pillars to be focused on building relationships with right now? And B, how important is video in establishing yourself as an expert and actually opening up those conversations?
Both excellent questions. Video, I'll say this very quickly. Video is king, and that I'm not the only person that's ever said that to you, I'm sure. And I won't be the last person that will ever say that to you. But the truth of the matter is video is scary for a lot of people. And I get that, as somebody who's been doing it myself for many, many years, I still hate it. But here's the reality is people need to hear me talk. People need to hear the way that I articulate things. People need to understand the passion that you have behind something. I can tell you I've had multiple speaking engagements booked solely based off the fact that people have reached out and said, we just love the way you describe things. Yeah. And how can somebody articulate that in a still photo? They can't, right? So the reality is that video is very connecting. It allows people to feel kind of like they're part of your life, even though they may not be. And I can tell you, when I'm even walking around in my yard outside and I flip my phone around and I talk to my camera, that's really me just expressing what's going on in my life and what's in my heart and in that moment. I call them kind of like your mindset moments, but people are very, very excited to feel like they are part of my life every day, even though they're not physically with me. And then the second part to or that was the second part to your question. So we'll back up to the first part of your question, but the 4 pillars, what is the mortgage industry talking about right now, or what they should be talking about, I think is a better way of phrasing it. What they're currently talking about is interest rates, and that seems to be what everybody wants to talk about because of the nature of the industry. What I think people are missing the boat on is that marry the house and date the rate is a conversation that needs to go in the trash can and stay there. Because the reality is it's overused, it's white noise, and all you're doing is adding to the rest of the platform talking about the exact same thing. So what we need to focus on is, what is your unique value proposition? I hate saying that, but that is truly what it is. Because, for the client I was describing who specializes in the divorce side of things, he called me when he decided that he was going to come on as a client and was like, this is a really weird thing to be really good at because I'm super happily married and I don't want anybody to think that, I'm sitting here like pro divorce by any means. So he had some natural hesitation to being able to kind of put that out there and say, like, I'm certified in this. A lot of my clients reach out to me post-divorce, or all of a sudden their money and their finances are just a hot mess after getting divorced and they have no idea how to make it make sense, but they have 3 kids and they need a house. And so you end up getting into these really messy situations. And so what we've really been able to do is build a brand for him around a conversation that really should be, in my opinion, a positive thing, right? Like divorce can feel very negative and feel very heavy. But how do we position this as something that is truly of value to these people who are really going through it, right? They need that light. And so for him, that's what we were able to do. And I'm super excited about what we're doing for him. But the conversations that people need to have is, what is your unique value proposition and where can you really add value based off of who you actually are? One of our clients is a veteran specialist, right? And it's not just like, hey, I just really like the VA loan. Like, he himself was former active duty, was medically retired. And he actually specializes in working with veterans who are medically retired and to have dual income families, right? Meaning they may not need a VA loan, right? But they have unique other scenarios. And so for him, instead of saying I specialize in working with veterans, how can we change the message so that it actually falls on the ears of people that he really wants to work with?
Yeah.
Instead of just saying I'm a VA guy, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes total sense. And I think one of the things that social media opens us up to, and is such an incredible opportunity that I think so many people in the mortgage business are missing, is that when you identify your niche, you can go after multiple niches and be a specialist to each or all, but that messaging has to be there. But oftentimes in your mortgage business, just being the expert in your local area in one specific niche type of product, as soon as you're talking to just that audience, they're easy to identify. You have more conversations, you become the expert, and there's so much business in the niches of the industry that you can just go out and become dominant in a very short period of time using social media, which is absolutely incredible.
Well, the funny thing about that is people think the opposite. Like, they have such a closed mindset on it, right? Is they feel like, oh, well, if I niche down, then I'm actually pigeonholing myself, or I don't want somebody who's not in this to reach out to me, or who's not in this to feel like they can't reach out to me. And I say this laughingly, but the reality is that people will reach out to you more if you actually niche down, because you really come across as an expert, and people are going to say, hey, Michelle, I know you specialize in, working with realtors and mortgage professionals, but I'm in insurance. Can you help me? Of course I can, right? Because the methodology transcends, but the reality is that they're more inclined to reach out to you because clearly you know what you're talking about. And that's what we're trying to get all of the mortgage industry, for the sake of this conversation, to understand, is you have something to offer, talk about it, and don't be afraid that it's going to, quote, close off your ability to go generate new business.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Michelle, that's incredible information. I would love to have you back on the show again to do an even deeper dive. But for right now, for people who are looking for information about you, I highly recommend you follow Michelle on social media. Watch what she's doing. She's an absolute expert at it. And then the Instagram Power Method, how do people find out about that? Where would you like people to go to get more information?
Yeah. So the last thing I'll say, and I'll dig into that, is I just want people to understand, and maybe this can be the topic for our next chat, but Instagram is relationship building at scale. It truly is prospecting at scale. And I think that that's the point of everything that you and I have been saying, Chris, for the whole point of this conversation, or what the whole point of it is you can prospect at scale. And, if you take it that seriously, your marketing budget will shrivel, because you're going to stop spending money on things that aren't working. So that's the point. But as far as connecting with me, Instagram is definitely the best way. I answer all of my own messages and I check them constantly. But on Instagram, Berman Media Social, you can find me there. As far as the Instagram Power Method is concerned, the course itself, it's basically my thesis. It's quite long in a very good way. It is 86 videos and 27 homework assignments. And it is very, very in depth, where you will actually get to go through it and really learn how to do everything that I just described, but on steroids. And as far as purchasing that, the best thing I could say is send me a DM on Instagram and I will send you the link directly, because you actually cannot buy it off the internet without going through me first.
Fantastic. That is amazing. Well, again, thank you for sharing your knowledge and for being with us here today. To all of our listeners, the greatest compliment that we can get is a 5-star review on iTunes. And if you're watching this on social media, hit us with a like and leave us a comment below to let us know what your major takeaway was again. And again, Michelle, thank you so much for being on the show.
You're so welcome. Thanks so much for having me.